ask you all to stand and clap our speakers up to the stage here, if you wouldn't mind. So stand and let's give it a warm welcome. Just a couple more words about Heroku, just because they have been such a great partner to us. So as a longtime partner of Startup Grind, they are a cloud-based platform as a service that gives startups a powerful solution for building, deploying, and operating their business-critical apps. The really cool thing about them is that they're a fully managed service. So that means everything from services, hardware, and infrastructure. They give away a ton of free services that allow startups like many of you either are founders of or maybe involved in, that let them get established, but then also give them the ability to scale. So another reason why they're a great partner for us as well. But I would say that the other thing that is really pretty unique about them is that they're very, very focused on startups in general, as are we, and not just focused at the founders, but also from a technical perspective. So we're talking about startup teams as well. So I'm assuming that that's what you're here for, so that's what we are going to, without further delay. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and let's go on down the line and let our technologists here today introduce themselves.
Great. So my name is Christina Sear. I'm CEO of Detour, and we make non-rectangular phones for non-rectangular people, starting with the phone in the shape of a circle called the Circle Phone. Our second Circle Phone will be out this January. So mid-January we'll be running pre-sales for it. It has Android 9 on it and all the apps that you're familiar with.
Do you have an example?
No, unfortunately we can't let them out until January.
Not allowed to be out in the wild.
Exactly. Thank you for asking, though.
So for those of you who are wondering, we got our bases covered: hardware, software, technology. We do it all here. Mamta.
Yes. I'm Mamta Banerjee. I like to start off saying, hey, I'm a mom, technologist, two-time entrepreneur. I know Mike said six times, so I have a long way to go. And after my startup journeys, I moved back into corporate America. I run engineering teams at Expedia, and I'm primarily focused on building a multi-channel conversation platform.
Excellent. All right, so my name is Nadia. I came to Seattle in 2004, and I joined a startup called Amazon. It was a startup sometime. Joined Amazon, been with Amazon for many years. Advantage of joining early, been a member of Jeff Bezos' team for a number of years, and then 6 years ago got the itch to go into another startup, and started a startup in physical bricks and mortar space. Just recently sold my startup, which is startups are like boats. Great day you start them, great day you sell them. In the middle, not so much. And now I am on my second startup, which we launched about a year ago.
Excellent. Well, so as you can see here, we've got some expertise on the panel here, so don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. We will take a Q&A session at the end, but this is very conversational, so at any point if you just raise your hand and want to jump in here, we're happy to accommodate that as well. The great thing about Startup Grind is it is very conversational, and we have a lot of flexibility on topics, but I think that probably top of mind for a lot of folks, and in fact a couple of folks wrote to me directly and wanted to discuss kind of what the biggest product and technology challenges that you've experienced in the most recent times, and kind of how you dealt with those, pivoted, and kind of incorporated new technologies and emerging technologies into those solutions as well. I see a lot of nodding around here.
Let's start with a round four.
Yeah, exactly. So it's It's really hard as a startup, particularly in the mobile phone industry, when you're dealing with consumer electronics, to be taken seriously by vendors and to actually, you don't even know what your projections are going to be, and they won't even give you the product unless you have certain levels of projections. And so, it's a big kind of game. And so we always say, this year we'll have modest projections, but next year these are what we expect. And so then they're like, oh, okay, here's the product, kind of thing. But in our world, for example, Qualcomm owns a lot of the technology that we use, but we're not allowed to deal directly with Qualcomm. So we have to go through vendors who have actually wrapped their product around Qualcomm technology. And so that's how we've surmounted some of our challenges, just going through second tier distributors.
So friend of friends.
Friend of friends. And they're willing to deal with smaller startups and give us more face time, so it actually works out in the end.
So from a software perspective, I'm assuming that maybe it's the same, but maybe it's different.
So I'm technologist at heart, but I try to think first about the business problem and what am I trying to do, and then find the best technology to match and to try to solve it. And in terms of the challenges with technology, I think the most important one is to try to play with technology and then dump it if you see that it's too hard, which is a horrible advice from a technologist's perspective, but it's actually a very practical advice. So for example, when I left Amazon, my first I spend a lot of time on blockchain, and being in supply chain sounds really good. Blockchain, how cool is that? Everybody talks about it and so on. And I spent about a year pulling my hair out trying to figure it out, and it's so hard. And it was so hard to work with it and to make updates to your supply chain, blockchain, etc. that I gave up. I said, this is just too hard, so it's not going to work. And then my next technology was RFID, because in my current business I also own a store, or a set of stores, and I'm trying to work with RFID. And it's also hard. It's not hard from a technical perspective, but very hard from process perspective to make sure that every item is tagged, it's read correctly, that the customer walks by. So what I'm trying to do is, I have a store in Linwood, and we're trying to do checkout, where you walk around the big store, pick everything you like, and then you just walk out. And it sounds so cool, and Amazon does it, and sounds really cool, and so we've been going at it for over a year, and it's not that cool, it's just darn hard. I haven't dumped that technology yet, we keep on going and going and going, but if you go to my Linwood store and try to check out, if you're lucky, you'll be able to just check out and everything will be perfect. And if you're very lucky, the system will not work and you just get everything for free.
That seems a little extreme.
Great customer experience. Now they scanned only one item and you had 10 in your basket. Congratulations.
So what are the specific technological challenges that you have with this particular kind of aspect?
With this particular one, it's pans, cookie trays, metal cookie. So my store is a department store, so we have everything. We have clothing and beautiful home goods and toys and nursery, and the prices are ridiculously low, so just a few dollars. We're trying to keep everything under $5, and it's on trend, and sounds really cool. But the problem is that the variety of product is what's killing me. It's from pans to metal decor items and so on, and hence it just doesn't scan.
Is that because of what the product's actually made of and the RFID?
Yeah.
It's a combination of the physical with the technology.
So even if you put RFID tag on every item, and which is hard to begin with. But even if you do that, after that, if you have a big basket with lots of different items, even though the readers are everywhere, it doesn't read. But check out, get a few pens and cookie trays. That's the way to do it. That blocks everything else.
How to shoplift.
How to shoplift, yeah.
You didn't know that that's the talk you were coming to here.
Yeah. The prices are very low, so you won't be able to lift much. Just so you're stealing $3 to $4, $5 items, but they're gorgeous and they're really cool.
I feel like the irony here is that we're talking about technology, which most people think of as a very intangible thing, and yet it keeps on being connected back to the physical things, and the difficulty is the kind of weaving those two things together. Is that a...
And I'm not complaining because I had free lunch on Amazon Go for a year when they started. How many of you have been to Amazon Go? So
excellent.
now it's hard to steal. In early days, it's just a free lunch every time. You come in, you put it off the shelf, you put it back on the shelf, take it off the shelf, free lunch. So now it's harder. Now you have to be really creative. You really need to think about how to do it.
This is where you lose control of the conversation. This is both the upside and the
Free lunch is important.
Yes. Hey, in startups you need all the free lunches you can get.
Free lunches.
Yeah, let me tell you. What about you? What kind of technological challenges have you been faced with in kind of recent times?
So I'll take a slightly different route from the entrepreneurs, because I've been an entrepreneur before. But I guess in a slightly larger company, and when you're looking at scale, some of the technology problems are different. So I'll give you an example. End of last year, like, we built this conversational platform from scratch, and we were like ready to launch. But how do you, and we had like over 100 developers working on it. So how do you ensure that when you launch, it doesn't fall flat on its face, right? So I think that was an interesting challenge. So what we did was we came up with all the different, like a capability maturity model, where we looked at 15 different criteria to make sure that the software that we shipped was actually resilient, it had been tested, and that we did chaos engineering on it. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term chaos testing. So what it really means is we inject failure into the system and to see how the system actually works and is able to handle it. And so we went through like a rigorous process, and we had to like stop from actually releasing and launching our product just because we wanted to have that discipline and build that in. And it took some time, but when we did launch, it was a very smooth launch.
Got it. How much extra time did you build into that? Because that actually leads me back to a product roadmap question.
So I think initially when we started, it was like an afterthought. But after we did start defining what the criteria were, and actually also just bringing all the teams up to speed on it, it took a couple of weeks. So yeah, it wasn't originally built in the product roadmap, but we were forced to because we didn't want to launch unless we had all of this in place.
Did that change how you started planning for launches going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So how much padding is in there now?
But I think the interesting thing is now, anytime we are launching like a feature or a capability, we always make sure we rigorously test it through and inject failure, make sure that it's really resilient, and that helps a lot. Yeah, and we also build out, yeah, go ahead.
Let me offer an alternative perspective. Don't test anything, just put beta on it and say, dear customer, it's a beta, and test on customer.
So as a startup user, I did that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's slightly different when you're in a
larger organization.
And you're delivering
So
to enterprise. And
exactly, to enterprise. So I would always say our users, we had both my startups were B2C. I would say our users are going to test a product, but yes. But here we did a lot more. We did synthetic testing outside in every 5 minutes. We had multiple tests running, so we could see what our SLAs were, availability, performance, TP 90, 95. So yeah.
Nah. If you're for a startup, just launch it fast and see what happens.
Two different perspectives, two different stages, let's be clear. But
I've been there. I understand.
So yeah, I would love to circle back around. I know Christina, you and I have had a couple of conversations about how you have changed your approach to putting your product roadmap together.
Yes.
I'd love to hear you. I would love for you to share your perspective on that.
Definitely. So all of our founders are parents, and one of the interesting things that happened was in the first couple of years, we would get together in May and we would plot out the next 12 months. And so during that time, we would, of course, put the conferences that our company would be attending, if we would have a booth there or not, how many team members we would need to prepare, those kinds of things. But we also ended up putting our kids' birthdays on the calendar. Like, we will never ship on a kid's child's birthday, and we will never ship on your anniversary, and those kinds of things. So typically we have about 12 people work. We've worked with over 60 contractors on the Circle Phone project, but typically at one point in time we'll have about 12 people. So typically those 12 people will come with us during a particular season, but we'll have a year-long roadmap. And so particularly for our founders, we need to keep important dates in mind that we want to work around. And we also know that we have periods and seasons of high productivity. For example, November is a great, early November, late October, early November, great period of productivity. There's also one that occurs in the spring. Also, the first couple weeks of January are very productive. I mean, and when your company starts to go through many different years, you start to see a pattern emerge of, gosh, we're really not productive in, say, the weeks right before Christmas. So, or maybe that Thanksgiving week. And so then we know to actually kind of decrease the expectations during that period and actually give people time off and extra time off during those times, and be understanding, when we have events and things like that. And because of that, when we've had to really work hard and, give those 60, 80 hours per week, then it has built resiliency into our team, where we have less burnout than I think other teams have had.
Excellent. Any other differing or similar experiences with either of you two?
Gosh, I'm scared. I don't even remember my kid's birthday at all. My calendar would be very useful. No, I think it depends very much on the style and what the culture is and what makes you happy. I think the vast majority of startups probably don't.
They don't do that.
Children's.
Right. I think since most of us were transitioning from being stay-at-home moms, and that was still very important, and our children were still very young, so still in elementary school, and each milestone was really, really important. But when they hit middle school and high school, they kind of don't want you there, so it's not as important. But when we first got started, that was really important.
And obviously, in a larger organization, you can't design an entire product roadmap in that manner. But
let's see, what day do we have no birthdays?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
But are there significant changes that you've made to designing product roadmaps, or that your company, that or understand how that has changed and evolved over time, or is it kind of same old, same old?
No, so definitely we don't plan any large launches in December.
Mm-hmm.
Or definitely not after the first week of December, right? And plus the other thing is we need to make sure people are available on call, and we want to make sure that there's 24/7 support available. So we avoid. I mean, I got hit really bad because we once launched a partner in December, and then my devs were after me saying, "We'll never."
Trial by fire.
Exactly.
Interesting. So you had mentioned that you worked with 60 consultants over a period of time. Working in hardware, I imagine you have a lot of overseas interaction and whatnot, and working for a global company, and I'm assuming that from a product perspective, we've become a globalized society, even if our direct employees are all predominantly located in a singular position. So I guess my question is what kinds of experiences have you had, and kind of recommendations can you give around kind of adapting to working with both across different time zones, effectively working in that kind of global or dispersed workplace in order to be able to, and also requiring to a larger extent larger teams of people in order to deliver on your technology roadmaps and whatnot.
Well, I think the first thing that changes is the expectations that your hours are from 9 to 5. I mean, if you have a global team, you're kind of more available outside of those hours. And so, for example, I'll be taking support calls late at night or early in the morning for China to work with our partners there and to, if something's come up, to troubleshoot any issues.
Have you found that to be the case as well?
Well, let me start that coming from a startup, you're used to having this
Right.
24/7 mindset. And I remember during my Techstars Seattle days, this was end of 2014, like Sunday nights, you will,
Yes.
we would be there at Techstars till 11, 12, we'll have meetings. So I'm just...
On Sunday nights?
Yes.
we used to-
Sunday is like the new Monday.
Wow. Okay.
I don't remember why, but this was 2014. Sunday nights we would have a lot of reviews and catch up, and then yes, coming into Expedia, I did bring in a lot of my startup culture, which and on top of that, having global teams. In my previous role at Expedia, I had teams in Brisbane and Montreal and other locations. But in my current role, I have 30% or more of my organization based out of Gurgaon and Bangalore in India. And the overlap there's just zero office hours overlap. So it becomes 24/7. And it's interesting because you still need to have a life. You still need to be able to manage just across different time zones and not burn people out at the same time. So it's been a challenge, that's all I can say. But the teams are aware, and we try to do a lot on Slack, and so we avoid late night meetings, but it is inevitable.
And has technology changed that dramatically? So you mentioned Slack. I know that there's been a lot of development around, what used to be just, conference calls. Now the video quality and kind of the interaction is quite different than it was even just a few years ago.
I just travel. I just get on a plane. So just a couple of weeks ago, my mother was visiting me, and we're sitting in a kitchen, and a postal man comes in, knocks on the door, brings a gift. And my mom opens a gift, and it's a gorgeous vase. And my mom is thinking it's a gift from boyfriend or from somebody else, and she's really impressed with me. And then she looks, and the gift is from Delta Airlines. So I think if you're in a startup, you have to think hard if you want to have a global team or not, because you don't want gifts from Delta Airlines. You want gifts from lovers and stuff like that. So it's sad. So you have to think. The second thing is Seattle is in the worst time zone ever. Like you can't come up with a worse place to have a global team, because no matter who you're working with, you're always up in some ungodly hour. So think 3 times if you want to have a global team, or if you're just very happy to be locally. I probably would do a lot more locally if I have my choice, because it's a lot of waste of time.
Yeah. So I actually like the fact fact that you mentioned that you travel a lot. So how valuable is FaceTime in developing relationships and building these teams?
Well, you get a lot of miles. That's a big plus. But FaceTime, for me, I'm in the business of physical and
Yes.
virtual, so I need to see. For me, it's very useful. I don't care about seeing people. I don't like people. But looking at physical processes and yelling at the team is very helpful.
Clearly, we didn't prep for this. No, I love the diversity. I love the diversity of experience. I would imagine that this creates very different cultures within your teams, within your companies, and whatnot. I would love to hear kind of the things that you do kind of hold and value in the culture of the teams that you're building.
You know, it's again, the culture is what you want it to be and what you enjoy. For me, you know, startup is a grind, and so for me, it's a culture of no life. And
we didn't even pay her to say that.
And everybody says, you know, work-life balance. What work-life balance? Are you kidding me? There's no balance of anything. There's just no life. And so you have to. For many startups to be successful, that's what you have to do. I thought I worked hard at Amazon, and everybody's saying, oh, people work at Amazon so hard. Total bullshit. At Amazon, they're total slackers. Total slackers. When you have a startup, that's when you work hard. And so I create a culture of barking, yelling, and working really, really hard.
And I imagine that the people who are drawn to that, that's what they want as well. That they're pretty driven and ambitious, and you guys are attacking, you know, some very hard problems and solving as well.
And I think it's important to create a culture which attracts the right people, and that's what naturally will. And it's not for everybody.
But I also think in startup that being brutally honest and very direct and frank cuts right to the problem. As awkward and uncomfortable as it may be for some people, you just get more done.
Yeah.
And people know where they stand and where they've messed up, where I've messed up, you know, and we can cut through the mess and get straight to the solution. So.
So I'm on the board of a Russian company, the largest Russian company, and our chairman, who is also an extremely successful man, has a good saying, you know, that it's very important to say the truth because you can always lie later. And say the truth, and that's his mantra, and it helps me a lot. I totally agree. Brutal honesty cuts to the chase, and if it doesn't work, you can lie later.
Do you find that that's the same, that transparency within an organization has become more of the norm as well in larger organizations as well?
So it depends. So the folks on my teams have always said that you can run it like a startup. So there's no hierarchy, there are no levels. You really earn your respect, and it's okay to fail, and you take a lot of risks, right? And so that's the type of culture that I promote. Of course, there's also cultural norms at Expedia, which we also follow, but I think I look at it more as the hustle. It doesn't mean you're taking shortcuts, but you're hustling to get things done. You're not waiting on somebody else or some other org or somebody else to deliver things. You just make it happen, right? And just the startup mentality of hustling is what I promote.
So that fail fast, fail quickly, and move on mentality is kind of penetrating all aspects of businesses, it sounds like, including technology.
And then I think if you're going back to like the people and the locations, it does help to have some FaceTime. So, and especially it's folks from different cultures, just knowing like what it takes to motivate teams, because we are all under a lot of pressure, and a lot of times, as Nadia put it, there is, what is that work-life balance, right? And you want to make sure that you really understand what motivates people, especially when you have large teams. And I think that's important. You get that when you meet face to face.
Yeah, sure. So speaking of technology and kind of emerging technologies, you mentioned blockchain and
1 year of my life, not going to get it back. Any of you using blockchain? I don't think so. Maybe I'm missing something.
So I guess my question would be, and I'm guessing that some of our audience members would also be curious to know, in thinking kind of 2 steps ahead, these emerging technologies that aren't necessarily a part of your current technology and product roadmaps, how important is it for you to be cognizant of them and to try to tie them in or kind of leave yourself open to be able to incorporate them as they develop into your existing platforms or the feature sets that you're building and those kinds of things?
So for our product, it's absolutely essential that we look in the future. So for example, the phones that you buy today have 3-year-old technology on it. So if you're not thinking 3 years into the future, or even 5 years into the future about mobile phones, about the technology you're putting on mobile phones, you're going to lose. So we always have to be cognizant of the technology coming along. One particular area that we've been intrigued with is all the voice technology that's coming along. So a lot of mobile phones still ship with only 1 microphone. But you'll see, for example, the Amazon Alexa kit has 4. So the quad microphone is actually much better for picking up voice commands. And to be able to incorporate some sort of that hardware now so that we can incorporate the software later is really important for us. That being said, it didn't make it into this phone, but we're hoping that it'll make it into the next phone. We still keep looking at it every day. Every day. So looking forward to it.
Minute by minute.
Yes, minute by minute. It's like, can we squeak it in? Can we squeak it in? Yeah. But you don't want to feature creep either, so it's hard.
Yeah.
So for my teams, what we try to do is once a month, we have a day for innovation. And folks can pick technologies, try things out, and integrate them into, do POCs and integrate them into either current platform or just test things out. So just to kind of keep folks up to date on what's going on. It's a continuously changing world.
To me, the way I think about it is that it's a big bet, betting on a future technology, and it has a huge risk to it. So for your startup, you have to decide how much risk they want to take, and do you want to take 100% of the risk and just focus on a new technology? Look at me and blockchain, a year later, nothing. Or you can split 50-50 and do 50% of a core and then 50% of total risk. You just need to decide what's your risk profile. If you're betting on something futuristic, the chances for it not to work is just really high, and the chances for it to flop is really high. So if you, but on the other hand, if you, the reward is really high too, and you are the first mover and stuff like that. So you just need to decide what kind of patience you have for that stuff.
And also the cost. So for us to put 4 microphones on instead of just 1 in this space, and all the constraints
So
there.
kind of the ROI on the
It's
user experience
really,
versus
yeah, it's a lot of
and-
deep decisions there.
So how do you weigh those decisions? I mean, I understand risk profile here, but I mean, there are so many considerations, especially if you're in a B2C situation, as a couple of you, actually, many of you are here.
For us, it's price per unit. So if we can't fit it into that particular price per unit that year, then we have to pass. But then if we get a lot of orders, then the price per unit drops, then we have potential for sneaking stuff in.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are
It's risky.
Are there any technologies that are currently, I call them emerging, but they get a lot of press? You know, we have AR, VR, AI, machine learning, etc. Are there any that you view as not being like particularly high risk, that this is the future and that you do need to be thinking about them and really talking about and incorporating those kinds of things into your current technology kind of maps?
Yeah, you know, something like machine learning or that's, I mean, it solves a real need. So I would probably just look at, is a technology going to create a phenomenally different experience or not, to make it worth the bet or not. Is it going to address the real problem or not?
So it's not table stakes at this point. It's
But
not.
so like in my business, I probably try to stick to like do 70% of the core. I need to buy the best products at a really low price, figure out the basics, but then try and offer some phenomenal checkout or something like that.
So from the perspective of hiring, so now you're talking about not just feature sets of the current technology that you're building and feature sets and whatnot, but you're now also talking about future as well. From a staffing perspective, is that becoming incrementally more difficult, and is the skill sets that you're looking for out there?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna pass. We have contractors, so we don't do permanent hires. We do, okay, we'll be working together in the next 12 weeks. This is what we're gonna get done, kind of thing. So, but it is difficult finding skills. When I first started out, I was always looking at LinkedIn profiles for the title. And boy, that was a big mistake. So looking for electrical engineers, there are a lot of people working in the consumer electronics industry that don't have a bachelor's or a master's in electrical engineering, but are using the tools that we're using. And we're on a day-to-day basis, we just need them to use the tools we're using. So I learned that instead of looking at titles, to actually look at the tools. So if any of you know anybody who's looking for a job right now, if they could just list the tools that they use somewhere on their LinkedIn so that it's searchable, it doesn't even have to be, in that current, position, title or anything, but I'll find it. It's really, really useful, yeah.
So I'm just going to say hiring is hard, period, in the Seattle area. I don't know what you think, but especially senior principal level developers, it's just hard to hire. Good, like the difference I think between an average developer and a really good developer is huge.
Is huge.
In like the value they bring to the organization. But identifying and hiring them is really tough. So we've been mostly going through referrals. And referrals help a lot, but the market is extremely hard. So, and yes, you're right, we're always trying to hire for skills or people who've done this before. And for us, it's been folks who've built conversation platforms in the past.
How about you?
Yeah, so hiring is very expensive. People are very expensive. So if you're starting your startup, that's very expensive. So think what you want to do. I try to hire as many college hires as I can. They don't know anything. They don't know that you don't work 20 hours a day. They eager to learn, and they're a lot cheaper than the principal. So that's what I try to do. I try to have just a few very experienced people and then a lot of college hires, and balance the budget that way.
So a lot of on-the-job learning is kind of what you're going for, and developing people and kind of internally to fit the roles and the skill sets that you need specifically for your company.
Yeah, developing people sounds good, but it sounds much better than what it is. Yeah.
HR specialist here.
Yeah.
Yes, we got a question.
Yeah, so you're hiring the novice.
Yeah.
What qualities are you looking for, since they don't necessarily have experience?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so we go to, we don't go to top tier schools just because we can't afford it and we can't compete with Googles of the world. But we go to, to Spokane, we go to University of Washington, and we look for folks who are nerdy and curious in technology and who like to code, and we bring them on and don't tell them anything, and they actually do really well.
Well, so
Not develop anyway.
But that happens alongside, unintentional.
I have no idea, but they're just good code. They start coding pretty quickly, pretty well.
So it sounds like there's got to be a passion for it, and certainly a curiosity
Yeah.
around it
Yeah.
from a character
Yeah.
perspective. So is there anything else that you're looking for, like that when you just click with somebody, you think, oh, that's my person, and I know that they're going to be great, or that I can develop them into something great?
I think if you go late at night to CS department and you see who has his lights on and still typing on a computer,
Yes.
that's the guy or girl I want.
Yeah, the people who are passionate
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. What are your thoughts?
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I'm tired of hiring experienced people because they're too stuck.
Yeah,
Right?
expensive too.
And right, no, they're super expensive. They're overpaid, and often think too much of themselves. And then also, well, they want to do it the way they did it. And I'm not interested in that. I want to do something new. So I always say ambitious, bright, and curious. Those are the things I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That's good.
But it sounds like you're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Someone who's going to really geek out on it, and then don't try and control them. Like let them do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
That sounds like a good strategy. And cheap one too.
Exactly.
Yes.
I have a question. Okay, so I actually just moved here, and my husband is graduating in computer science in Utah right now. And we're coming from a different standpoint because all of the startups are hard to find because he's looking for a job right now. It's hard to find the startups here because they're watered down by all of the big companies. So where do you guys put your, I don't know, when you're looking for somebody, where do you put that out into the big, huge market of tech that's out there to find the right person?
For us, AngelList. So if you're looking to join a startup, I would recommend going to angel.co. And it used to be called AngelList, and now it just goes by angel.co. But it's only startups who are advertising. And if you're looking to join a startup, it's all startup jobs. So.
And it's built in Seattle.
Yeah, there's a lot on built-in these days as well.
Built in Seattle.
I would actually also, just because I've worked with dozens of startups
Right.
over the years.
She's
as
the
well.
expert. No, serious.
Is that I find that a lot of incubator companies, so we're in Madrona, we're in the Create 33 space, which is the incubator for Madrona Venture Capital upstairs. And once you get plugged into one of those, it's a pretty incestuous little world. It's a lot smaller than you think it is. I mean, I've bounced back and forth between the Bay Area and here many, many times, and the circles become pretty small. So sometimes it's just getting that first introduction. The other thing is actually doing your due diligence and looking for the specific technologies that you want to work in and the kinds of companies that you want to work for and cold calling them. And most of them have open positions that they may not even be advertising for. And I don't know about you ladies, feel free to chime in here, but that if somebody shows up on your doorstep with the right skill set, they're not going to be like, well, the job, we don't have a specific head count for that. They'll find a way to make it work if it's a good fit. But
It's true. We had one person that came up to me at Seattle Startup Week 2 years ago, and he said, I just love non-rectangular phones for non-rectangular people. I want a circle phone. And he gave me like 10 reasons why it was a good phone. And he said, I'm going to come to work tomorrow. And I was like, what? Like, we don't even have money for you. And he's like, no, is it okay if I just come to work tomorrow? And I'm like, we don't have money for you. You can show up. We don't have money for you. And he showed up. He showed up for like, a year. So we ended up paying him after the first week. We were like, okay, you're dedicated. And he was really, really good. So yeah, it was a lucky fit. It was the right person at the right time. We didn't know it.
That's a lot. I mean, I don't know about you ladies. I'd love for you to chime in on this, especially with your own personal careers and kind of the intersections that you've had. Getting connected with Amazon very early on. A lot of it is luck and timing. So maybe you can chime in about that.
Oh, that was lack of judgment. Lack of good judgment. It was like, yeah, sometimes you just make the worst decision of your life, and it turns out to be the best decision of your life, right? So that's happened. But your husband, does he want to work for a startup, or does he want to work for, do you want to see him from time to time?
She's looking out for you.
It would be better if he was here. So he's in Utah still, so yeah, anything's better. Yeah, he does.
But does he want to for startup or for a bigger
Obviously,
company?
he's open to anything. He loves software engineering, so anything that he's open to. He's just hungry, I think. So yeah.
You just said the H
Yeah.
word there.
They're all up for it.
Exactly. Not me though. We don't need software development. We need hardware people. Yeah. Exactly.
So I always tell people I'm always recruiting. It doesn't
Yes,
matter if I'm at the
yes.
gym, it doesn't matter. I'm always recruiting. And in fact, as soon as I moved into Expedia, I brought my co-founder in. And she's on my current team too. So yes, it's, we're always recruiting.
That's awesome. By the way, Nadia was being very modest when she answered the question about Amazon. For those of you who may not have read her bio, she was like a VP at Amazon, so she was there a while, and she had a huge impact. But
That's because you join early. That's a good thing about joining startup, because like probably nobody would hire me at Amazon right now, but when you join early, it's really, really good. You can.
Plus, you just have exposure to so many more. I mean, because it's young, because it's hungry, because you have to wear so many hats. You just get that kind of more holistic experience and a lot more depth and breadth of experience in a much quicker amount of time as well.
and tired.
And tired. I don't know, I feel like the common themes here around technology and product, and when you put that together with startup means you don't sleep.
And I heard a quote the other day that entrepreneurs last like 10 years. That's it. I'm like, but I'm doing a hardware company. Like that's like
You're in it for the
that's
long
like
play.
minimum 10 years. So I was shocked to hear that. But you were doing startups for how long?
Between around 6 to 8 years. Yeah.
Okay, and you've done them your entire life.
Yeah.
So in fact, I think I'm ready to. I keep thinking
Dip your toe back in?
Yeah, back in. But I always tell people my husband is not ready.
Exactly.
Because he likes to see you.
It's true.
To Nadia's point. How much do you enjoy the people that you spend time with? So from for professionals who are in technology professionals now, what kinds of recommendations would you give them about how they should be developing their skills, and what kinds of ways in which would you steer them or direct them if they were asking that question of how do I continue to grow professionally, and what avenues would you recommend?
Are you talking about a young person?
I think across the board. I mean, certainly young for sure, but to unstick some of our more experienced folks, because that is actually a common question as well. I've been doing this type of technology work for a really long time. How do you stay current? How do you what are the kinds of things that they should be going to and using? I mean, I feel like a lot of times the more traditional certifications and master's degrees and those kinds of things aren't necessarily doing the trick, especially if you're based on what you guys are saying about how you're hiring these days as well. So yeah, I guess any words of advice you would have to give?
I try to stay and split my time between learning technology and learning the business. And I think it's very helpful when you're not a pure technologist, but you also think about business a lot. And I split my time that way. So I learn technology. In early days of my career, I was a pure technologist, spent most of my time sitting in a corner, not talking to anybody, just in front of the screen. And that's not good for your career either. So splitting your time, learning the business, learning technology, learning how to network,
So developing social skills. So are you saying that gone is the
Yeah, developing social skills.
yeah gone is the day with the singular individual contributor sitting in front of the computer screen? That it's become evolved beyond that? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's up to you to decide if that's what you want to do. That's fine, but. For me personally, it's very rewarding if you try many different things, technology and business, and I think actually Amazon helped me there quite a bit, because the interesting thing about Amazon is that a lot of business is run by technology, and so when you start as a pure software developer, if you're curious about business, you get sucked into business. And then before you know it, you actually run the business and you manage the business. And that's a really sweet spot for your career, because there aren't that many people in that space of both technology and business, so it's a good place to be.
Any other thoughts or considerations you would add?
I'll have to just say, just to add to that, there's, I guess, two ways of looking at it, right? When I moved into the startup world, I was a pure technologist. I had like zero exposure to business, and especially if you're in a slightly larger company, your role is a bit siloed, and I had to learn from scratch. But I think just being an entrepreneur, I still remember the first time for my first startup was, I actually launched it in India. I moved back to India and we did the first online e-filing, the tax filing site for India. And the first year we had over 40,000 users. But when we launched, I actually had to do a press conference. I had no idea, I had never done any of this before in my life, but yeah, you pick up aspects of the business, but then when I moved back into a pure tech role, you still use like what I call like a 360-degree view of what you're doing, making sure there's impact, right? You're questioning why you're doing something. But again, on the communication side of things, even if you're an individual contributor, right, you still have to be able to express your ideas. You have to be able to communicate your design and to be able to influence the teams around you. So I think the communication aspect is required no matter what your role is. It's just a different depth of communication and different span of influence.
So from an evolution standpoint, it really is a broadening, not necessarily of diving into specific languages, coding languages and that kind of thing, but an overall development, a more holistic development that spans and deepens into business as well.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's really important because frequently when you do your first startup, you think it's about the best product, and you put your heart in it and you develop phenomenal technology and things like that. But then you see a lot of it is about sales and how you sell it and how you market it. And product is important, but sales is equally important, if not more important. And so when you do your startup, you quickly realize that you have to go broad in different skill areas and in sales and in marketing, and pull yourself out of sitting behind a screen, because the best product with no marketing is probably not going to work unless you're really, really lucky, which just...
Well, and if the dynamics of the workplace are changing as well, where you're having more, fewer senior people teach and develop talent in-house and kind of grow that talent in-house, I would imagine that the communication and the business aspects become even more crucial when you're in that many-to-one kind of reporting situation and relying on them from a professional development standpoint of the rest of your staff as well. Lots of nodding. They're like, yes. Well, we're coming to a close real quick, and I want to make sure that I save some time for some Q&A. Although, Christina, you had, we've been looking at this kind of inwardly, kind of the development of technology within businesses, and you had a really interesting perspective that I thought was worth mentioning about technology being brought into the work site, from an Apple Watch to the communication tools and whatnot, which I would love you to share that perspective.
So it's been really fascinating to me to observe like the advent of the Apple Watch in particular. So I've, with our contractor workforce, so frequently they're in the office, and I've noticed that the first couple weeks that they first get an Apple Watch, their productivity just dives. It's really severely bad. And I don't know what to do about it, because you want people to be connected. If you send them like a message, you'd like them to respond to your message. And so they're uber connected, but they can't get the deep thought work done. And even before the advent of the Apple Watch, we did have discussions during various seasons of, because we would have new people come in and they would ask questions like every 5 minutes. And which is great, but some of them would do that more than others. And so we were like, gosh, maybe we should like instigate like, can we just have like from 10 to noon, like is the deep thought work, can you hold your questions just for 2 hours and I'll be with you in the afternoon, or I'm happy to answer your questions when you first come in the morning, or things like that, because I really need to get my work done and I really need to train you in the afternoon. And so, I'm trying to do this balance kind of thing. So I would love to hear from other people and even the audience what solutions you've come up with at your team. Yes.
Did you implement that, and did it stick?
So no, I don't have an Apple Watch, so it's hard for me to implement something, and especially with our changing workforce. So but I have thought about it, and I have written that like guidelines up and think, I should have newcomers like read these guidelines and stuff like this. But it's excruciating to ask someone to put away their watch. So like I haven't come up with a good solution about that. Just noticing that it's been really bad. And some people can recover after the first month, because the Apple Watch in particular, by default, all the notifications are on when you first get it, but then kind of people who are a little bit more savvy, they turn them off eventually, and then they get used to it or stop using it, or various things. But anyways, you were saying, Charlie?
I have no solution for you on the watch, but I agree with you. I had the exact same thought with can you have a certain number of hours per day where I could just go think, because you get a flow and you get an interruption, then you're done with it. Mm-hmm. So my solution in the end was I would just not be in the office. So, and I is in Denver a lot. The company I had, and I was in Seattle. So when I'm in Denver, talk to me all you want. We can talk whatever you want. When I'm in Seattle, I'm doing stuff, and then they can get to you through Slack, because most people don't call you. It's not getting in trouble.
Although I find that Slack can be just as intrusive, like that
Yeah,
immediate,
sometimes,
that
because
often requires that.
Right, they expect an immediate
You just turn it
answer.
off, right?
It's true. And
Because if it's on and you see the the number 1 or number 2, number 3, I can't resist to go do.
Right.
So I just like close it, done. I don't want to see it.
And I read a post from Paul Graham, and this was actually maybe 2 decades ago, but he's the founder of Y Combinator, and he talked about the differences in a manager's schedule and a technologist's schedule. So a technologist, 4-hour minimum. You need 4 hours minimum to be able to do your deep work. And if you schedule a meeting at 10:30, it like blows that 4-hour block. And for me, when I do my deep, electrical design work, minimum I need 4 hours just to like deep dive into it. And I'm keeping like, 50 million things all in my head while I'm, fixing this trace. I need to like not make it near this, but it needs to be near this, but it has to be so wide and so thick, and like there's just a million things that I need to keep in my mind while I'm doing that, and frequently engineers do. And so respecting kind of the engineer's workflow, and then also respecting the manager's workflow, because the manager's trying to, get everybody to communicate and organize everybody and making sure we're staying on schedule and all that kind of thing. So after I read that, it was really helpful to me it made me not feel alone, one, as an engineer, and then two, to also be respectful of, those meetings, because the face-to-face time is so essential.
We did implement at several of the technology companies I worked at a no meeting Thursdays, where literally for an entire day nobody had the authority, not even the CEO of the company, to call a meeting on that day. I mean, something had to be on fire if that were the case. But we actually found that to be pretty effective in many of the organizations that we've implemented that in.
Yeah.
And do you have anything like that? Because Microsoft is mostly meetings. I used to work at Microsoft. I had tons of meetings when I was there.
So I remember the first time I went from startup to the corporate world, I would be like, why do you guys have so many meetings?
Exactly.
So
It's like,
I would deny all the meetings unless it's like a 20-minute. So there's a joke around in the office that, if you need month, it needs to be a 13-minute meeting or something. Because I'm like, I want to have time to actually do real work.
yes.
So no, I have a problem with meetings. So, and a lot of times I don't show up if I don't feel that I'm either going to provide value or get value out of it. And I say the same thing to my teams too. You can do both.
And then, I'm sorry, side note on meetings. So when you are employing contractors, and say for example you're employing 12 and you're paying them $100 an hour, and you have an hour-long meeting and they're all there, you just go ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Oh, this person has to go to the bathroom. Ka-ching, ka-ching. It's really painful when you're the one, doling out and you're like, wow, like we're never having a group meeting ever again. I'm just gonna go meet with each person individually. I mean, like you tried to figure out ways to make meetings shorter and more efficient. And Amazon did have some great, like they had this tip where you would come into the meeting and there would be a summary of the meeting like on the desk. Some people told me, we had somebody come from Amazon and join our group for a while.
Yeah, then we try Alexa managing our meetings and stuff like that. That was fun.
So introduce more technology.
Technology.
What would she say?
Tell
Would
you
she
done.
say? Would she say
Done.
like done? The
Done.
meeting's over. You need to wrap up.
Yeah. I don't know. In my current company, I don't have any meetings at all, like none whatsoever, zero, just none. But which is nice. But yeah.
I want to read that.
I know. Yeah.
Exactly.
I just have none. Like if you look at my calendar, there's nothing on it. Absolutely nothing, which is great.
That's fantastic.
That's a lot of deep thinking.
Yeah, a lot of.
That's why we have one meeting in May for the whole team. We all get T-shirts. We get food. Like, it's the big deal.
I found that particular, I had never, that was a different perspective to think about the technology coming inward, the technology that people are actually bringing to the table, as opposed to necessarily the technology that you're building, and that actually has a pretty significant impact as well. So just another way to think about it. So anyways, as we wrap up here, are there any other questions that you'd love to throw out here? Levin?
With your experience working in startups versus large companies, if you were ever considering joining an existing startup, what criteria would you use to determine its potential?
Ooh, pick me. So I would look on AngelList for the positions, but also look on Crunchbase to see how old the company was, how many employees, also if they had been funded, to see if I was going to get paid. Those are all, and then also their revenue is usually public as well.
Yeah,
So
on the
I would
funding,
look at, if they're not funded, then definitely look at their revenue and make sure that they have revenue.
I would say,
In fact, look at their revenue first.
would you have a recommendation for how long since they were last funded, from a timeline perspective?
That is 18 months. So it needs to be in the last 18 months, preferably in the last 6 months they got funded. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have any other recommendations?
Yeah, again, depending, I think, on the size of the startup, I would look at, try to understand where the founders came from, what type of a culture do they have.
She's a people person. She's a good people person, yeah.
You just want to get paid.
I want to get great diversity on this panel here.
I want to pay my contractors.
Spend time with
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
This is the great thing about a conversational panel. You never know what you're going to get, which I love. That's my favorite part.
Exactly.
Is getting paid important, or is...
Can you not have both?
Well, but what's important to you?
To me,
Yeah.
being creative and passionate about what I do.
Well, then go with people then.
Yeah.
Go with the really cool
Yeah.
founders.
I think the
Not
the
even
other
so.
thing
But I also
about
want to get paid.
you also
Food is good.
the other part of the founders was more to see what their background was, right? Have they had successful exits in the past? Do they know what they're doing, right? And just making sure you interview them based on, again, the scale of the startup. So it's not then just them interviewing you, but you really interviewing, doing your background checks on the startup to see the potential.
But also, if you don't like it, leave.
Yeah.
Don't stick around.
I totally said
That's
that.
actually great advice
Yeah.
right there.
You need to go with your passion.
Yeah. After a month, you don't get what you want. Move.
Yeah.
Yeah, because professional development's a huge aspect of it too. I mean, if there's a specific skill set or, technology that you're looking to work with, those kinds of things, making sure that those boxes are checked as well.
Mhm. For us, since we can't pay well financially because we're a startup, we're not a financial venture for you, we're an adventure for you. So that's how
Give round phones to people?
yes.
I want a round phone.
Yes, exactly.
I think we can work something out here. We'll take 2 more questions and then we'll let these folks go. Go ahead.
When you ship a minimum viable product, how do you balance quality?
You thought you were getting away with
I
that.
You only answered that, right? Customer tested.
Yeah, if you're a startup, to me, a really cheap way to test it is to have customer do it. Because paying for a tester, it's just expensive. It's also very hard to really test it well. You need to, you didn't spend 2 weeks, you spend a lot more than that, and you spend a lot more people than that. What I found is that customers are actually very receptive to failures if you tell them that it's a beta, if you're very open about it. And so I ship very early on, total crap, barely working, and it's out of the door. And it's for large companies or for Amazon, same deal. It costs you less to ship early, and you will get a lot of feedback, really good one, from the customer. And it will be not just about the bugs, it will also be about features and functionalities and so on. So ship it and see what happens.
Although I have to say, so I think it also depends on the expense of your product. So our MVP was, it's online now, and we were kind of stretching the envelope for like what could ship a minimally viable product. And I know they say, if you're embarrassed, if you're not embarrassed of your first product, then you shipped it too late. But I didn't even intend to ship the product that we ended up shipping. It was our tester that I had built slapped together for our testers, and they started asking to buy it. And after the 20th person, we stopped talking them out of it, and we ended up doing a Kickstarter. We delivered all the phones in less than 60 days. I mean, we really kind of blew it out of the water. But we moved on to the, what we considered the real product, which is the 4G Android 9. And thank goodness that's coming out in January. So, but it's hard for consumer electronics because they're so pricey to just ship it. So for example, our prototypes right now are thousands of dollars. And people so for example, influencers asked for, can you just give us a sample? And I'm like, okay, our first prototype was $75,000. I will be flying with it. It will be in my hand. If you're lucky, you can look at it, kind of thing. We're now on our third prototype. So we just got those back from the assembler. Our assemblers actually here, we manufacture locally. And we got them back last week. And so those are less, not as expensive, but still quite pricey. And then by our booth at CES in January, hopefully those will be less than $5,000 each. But still, it's so scary. We only have 5 of them. We need them for testing even after CES. It's not like we're going to manufacture like a whole nother run. And so, but we may. So somebody's like, well, why don't you just let people just throw them around at CES? I'm like, the first Tesla was $1 million because a lot of the pieces were handmade on it. So it's really hard to ship, at least in consumer electronics, but software, ship from like idea stage. It's so great. So anyways, just went off on that.
No, I mean, I actually love the variance of perspective here and the rationale behind it
Right.
as well. I think the context is always key.
2 years, thousands of dollars,
Yes,
really.
for
it's
sure.
hard.
We'll take one more question if there is one. Otherwise, we are going straight to the raffle. So Heroku, yes, our sponsor for the evening, has actually sponsored the Startup Grind 2020 conference, which is down in Silicon Valley. They are going to pay for one lucky winner here tonight to attend that conference, and it's going to be based out. Yes, please let.
This is really high tech.
The easiest, the simplest solution is the best.
Just pull it out, read a name.
Yep.
Must be present to win.
All right. Love it.
No way!
You know what that proves right there is that passion wins every time. Every time.
Low attendance.
Even in modern. Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you for being here tonight. I mean, it's again hangover from all of last week's technology events and whatnot. It's late on a Tuesday night, a couple days before Halloween. So we so appreciate you being here. So appreciate you sharing your wisdom and knowledge. Actually, really appreciate just the diversity of both experience and advice as well. I think that it's great, and can't wait to get this published and spread the word as well. So if you all would stand one more time, we're going to clap these ladies off the stage.
This is really weird.